How you doing? Now, as we approach the 4th of July, I thought it would be proper to talk about our Declaration of Independence. It was quite an event. Richard Henry Lee came and with his petition to create a declaration. And I actually had the finished copy right here. It says in Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. It was an important time. It was difficult times with Britain. And as we went forward, they created a committee to write the Declaration, made up of John Adams and Robert Sherman, Robert Livingston, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. Thomas Jefferson does get the credit for the Declaration, but others worked on it, and Ben Franklin did a lot of work on the first part, kind of like the preamble section, sort of. And they brought it back, and they went through it line by line in the Continental Congress, discussing it, arguing over the language. And just so you understand the situation at the time, you could hear thunder and lightning outside. You could hear gunshots, cannon fire going off, because we really were already in a conflict. It's not like we declared our independence and then the conflict began. We were already there, and we've been there for some time. So what I'm going to read today is the original draft, or the oldest draft that we have. It's actually part of Jefferson's records. So I thought it would be interesting to go through it the way Jefferson and Franklin and Sherman intended it to be. And so we'll begin with that. It's quite a different document. And that's why it's so interesting. It's not like the one that was approved. So there's a lot of changes in here. So I just thought it would be interesting for you to hear it. A declaration by the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with inherent and inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to that ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its power in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are most disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations begin at a distinguished period, and pursuing unvariable the same object, events is designed to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to show off such governments and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to expunge their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of unremittent injuries and usurpations, among which appears no solitary fact to contradict the uniform tenor of the rest, but all have in direct object be submitted to a candid world for the truth of which we pledge a faith yet unsullied by falsehood. 1. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. 3. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the rights of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. 4. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of the people's records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into the compliance with its measures. 5. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly and continually for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. 6. He has refused for a long time after dissolution to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriation of land. 8. He has suffered the administration of justice totally to cease in some of these states, refusing his assent to laws for establishing judicial powers. 9. He has made our judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. 10. He has erected a multitude of new offices by self-assumed powers and sent hither swarms of new officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. 11. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies and ships of war without the consent of our legislatures. 12. He has affected to render the military independent of superior to the civil power. 13. He has combined with others to subject us to just jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts, pretended legislation for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial for punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us of benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these states, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring them invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. 14. He has abdicated government here, withdrawing his governors and declaring us out of his allegiance and protection. 15. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. 16. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, dissolution, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy unworthy and heads of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken on the high seas to bear against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. 18. He has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions of existence. 19. He has incited treasonable insurrections of our fellow citizens with the allurement of forfeiture and confiscation of our property. 20. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery into another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. He had prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable commerce, and that this assemblage of horrors might want no fact or distinguished die. He is now exciting those very people to rise in arms amongst us, and to purchase the liberty of which he has deprived them, by murdering the people on which he also obtruded them, thus paving off former crimes committed against the liberties of our people with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injuries. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of people who mean to be free. Future ages will scarcely believe that the hardiness of one man adventures within the short compass of 12 years, only to lay a foundation so broad and so undisguised for tyranny, for a people fostered and fixed in principles of freedom. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by the legislature to extend a jurisdiction over these states. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here, no one of which could warrant so strange a pretension that these were effected at the expense of our own blood and treasure, unassisted by the wealth of our or the strength of Great Britain, that in the constituting indeed our several forms of government, we had adopted one common king, thereby laying a foundation for perpetual league and amity with them, but that submission to their parliament was not part of our constitution, nor even an idea. If history may be credited, and we appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, as well as to the ties of our common kindred, to disavow these usurpations, which were likely to interrupt our connection and correspondence, they too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. And when occasions have been given them, by the regular course of their laws, of removing from their councils the disturbers of our harmony, they have by their free elections reestablished them in power. At this very time, too, they are permitting their chief magistrate to send over not only soldiers of our common blood, but Scotch and French mercenaries to invade and destroy us. These facts have given the last stab of agonizing affection, and manly spirit bids us to renounce forever these unfeeling brethren. We must endeavor to forget our former love for them, and to hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in peace enemies in war, in peace friends. We might have been a free and great people together, but a communication of grandeur and of freedom, it seems, 'tis below their dignity. Be it so, since they will have it. The road to happiness and to glory is open to us too. We will tread it apart from them and acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these states, reject and renounce all allegiance and subjection to the kings of Great Britain and all others who may hereafter claim by, through, or under them. We utterly dissolve all political connection which may heretofore have subsisted between us and the people of the Parliament of Great Britain. Finally, we do assert and declare these colonies to be free and independent states, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Following the declaration, they ordered sets printed. John Hancock signed his name large enough so the king could read it without his spectacles. We moved on. They went up one by one to sign. And as they signed, they knew the solemnity of the situation. One of the delegates said to the other that if they were hung, he would be in less pain because he would die quicker because of his weight than the thin man who would bounce around for a while. And this was the only joking time during this solemn occasion. And at the end, they were really concerned about being rounded up and killed, but they did what had to be done for the country. John Adams wrote to his wife and said that they would have to pay dearly for this declaration, but that it would be worth it. And so I just want you to think about it as you celebrate the 4th and understand how important this day really was. And think of your founders and what they went through to give you the liberty that you so rightly have today. So I just thought it would be good to go through this. There's a lots of different things in here that just didn't make it to the final draft. And I hope you can join me again for our next Constitution talk. Thank you.